Will a truce be called between Cape Town's warring taxi associations? Well, Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula is expected to address the taxi industry in the city today. Communities have been living in fear after more than 20 people were killed last month alone. This as Cata and Codeta wage a deadly taxi war over routes. The fighting has led to the deployment of police and the army to try to restore order. Routes have also been closed to try and stem the violence. At the same time, the provincial government has been trying to broker peace between the factions. Communities are now hopeful the minister's intervention will yield results. We are now going to cross to our reporter, Ronlad Masinda. He's been monitoring this story. Ronald, there was a ceasefire, the two warring taxi factions saying that, we're going to stop the gun violence. But are we any closer to a deal to bring taxi operations back to normal?
Well, the good news for commuters is that taxi operations have resumed in many parts of Cape Town. In Fikile, where we are, taxi operations resumed on Thursday. This follows a couple of days or a few days where taxi operations had to be halted, as many had feared that the taxi violence would have continued had taxi operations had been reopened. But we're also here inside Fikile, where Cata's Codeta's head offices are situated. Earlier this morning, taxi bosses were in a meeting. They've since gone to town to speak to Minister Fikile Mbalula to find out perhaps as to how they can resolve these issues. We do know that Cata also had their own meeting with Minister Mbalula yesterday. But just for more on what is happening on the ground, I am joined by the Codeta spokesperson, Mr. Andile Kanye. Mr. Kanye, thank you so much for your time. Tata, gasixelele uba ingxoxo zenu ninqwenela uva ntoni kuMinister Mbalula?
Eyona nto siyinqwenelayo kakhulu umsasazi into kokuba ngaba noko lo ngxubakaxaka sithi ngoku kwanele ngoku makungaphinde kubekho umparalogazi, and into esiyinqwenelayo kwiinkokheli zethu ezixoxa noMr Mbalula mazide zifikelele kwisombululo, ngoba ekugqibeleni uba bafikelele kwisombululo ithetha ukuthi ngoku abakhweli bona ngoku basemngciphekweni ngoku yoba ngaba baphelelwe ngumsebenzi, njengokuba usazi ke msasazi into yokuba ngaba sina le nto ikhoyo apha icorona eye yabachaphazela abantu kakhulu abantu boMzantsi Afrika. Ngoku xa izawuphinda ichaphazele ke ngoku nento yobungaba kungabikho zithuthi bazawuphelelwa ke ngoku abantu imisebenzi. Sinqwenela into yokuthi noko ingxoxo mazifikelele esigqibeni, iinkokheli zihlale phantsi zivumelane. Ndiqinisekile ke noko kuhleli abantu esibathembileyo phaya esiqonda uba ngaba bazawukwazi ukuza nesombululo, and isisombululo sikho kuminister, isisombululo sikule mibutho yomibini.
Okay, yintoni edala ukungabikho peace kwezi ngxoxo?
I think eyona ngxoxo yeyona nto ndiyibonayo mna msasazi into yoba ngaba ingathi iziphakamiso zale mibutho yomibini aba tata abavumi into yoba ngaba bacompromise kwimacala omabini. Zikhona iziphakamiso esiza nomnye uyasikhaba omnye, nesiza nomnye uyasikhaba omnye. Kodwa ke ngongenelelo leenkokheli ezimbini, uVavi kunye noHolomisa, ingathi noko ikhona wena intlantsana ekhanyayo etoneleni, ubonakala ukuthi noko ingathi noko izinto ngoku zihamba kakuhle. Kodwa into esiye sabe sivumelene kuyo yona msasazi into yoba ngaba makungaphinde kubekho pharalagazi, makungaphinde kubekho umntu uyawuthi abe uzawubulala omnye. Ngoko ke sisalindele ke ngokuba ngaba sive ezo ziphakamiso, kodwa ke siyeva nominister ukhona namhlanje.
Okugqibela, ba uminister akathethi le nto nifuna uyiva nizothini?
Well ke iyabalilishwa kuba kaloku ngoyena yena mntu simthembileyo into yoba ngaba uminister uyakwazi ukuba ngaba eze nesombululo. Kodwa ke ndinayo mna into ethi msasazi kakade uminister akukho nto nam endicimba fanele uzawuza nayo, kodwa isisombululo sixhomekeke kule mibutho emibini. Kuba kudala kakade yaba khona le ngxaki between le mibutho emibini, kodwa besidla ngohlala phantsi sibe thina siyayiresolva ngokwethu ingxaki eyawuthi ibe khona apha kule mibutho.
Bulela tata, exesha lakho. Mr. Andile Kanye from Codeta saying that they are calling for peace. They do want this matter to be resolved. I mean, this has been an ongoing issue for both these associations. They transport thousands of people on a daily basis, but yet there doesn't seem to be any peace between these associations. Well over 80 people have been killed this year alone in taxi violence, and scores of people have been injured, many of them commuters. We also heard from the Western Cape Transport Department, saying that even last week alone, a Golden Arrow bus driver was wounded by a stray bullet. So that just tells you the extent of the concerns on the ground for not only for people who are involved in the taxi industry, but also those who also use similar routes, those who are commuters trying to go to school and go to work, not knowing whether they will be caught in the crossfire.
Ronald, Minister Mbalula was involved in negotiations with these two taxi associations about 2 weeks ago. Nothing came out of that. He even came out of that meeting saying, listen, I don't have much leverage against these guys that I can use to try and broker a deal. So what's changed now? Has anything changed?
And that's what we were also hoping to hear from Minister Mbalula, because even today's meeting has been delayed for several days. Mr. Mbalula, in fact, this morning was supposed to be traveling to Paarl to try and maybe find a way of an alternative transport, because as we know, one of the hotly contested routes, the one between Paarl and Bellville, has been closed. No taxis are operating there currently. So the situation was that they would have tried and accelerate, train services for stranded commuters from Paarl and Bellville. But Mr. Mbalula remains defiant. He seems to think that things will be sorted out. We do know that for several months last year, he has been in negotiations in trying to maybe find a possible resolution to the ongoing taxi violence. We do know that even last year alone, there were well over 100 people who died in taxi violence. So this has been an ongoing issue. And Mbalula saying that, the taxi industry is the lifeblood of the township economy. So taxi industry, for it to work, taxi drivers, taxi operators should get along, and taxi bosses should get along in such a time, because many people depend on taxis in townships because it's an effective and an affordable mode of transport. So what we saw last week are many people who were left stranded, and they are also hoping that by 3 o'clock this afternoon, when Minister Mbalula is expected to perhaps give us feedback on the developments, where he will also be joined by Dalen Mitchell, who is the Transport MEC here in the Western Cape, to perhaps give people a bit of hope in terms of what has been transpiring with the taxi industry here in the province.
Ronlad Masinda is in Cape Town, keeping an eye on the negotiations between Cata and Codeta, the two warring taxi unions in the Western Cape.